All I ever have to do is be famous. People watch me, and they love me.
You can have a little taste of the good life too. Now I know you want it. Hell, everybody does. Do it to your own kind. What's the threat? We all sell out every day. Might as well be on the winning team.
The real men of the world have to stand up and say,
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. I'm all out of bubblegum.
This culminated with an American-instigated coup in Ukraine in 2014 that led to bloody fighting and major economic disruptions. Ukraine is a new nation with complex ethnically cleanse these regions. Eastern Ukraine includes a large number of ethnic Russians, who are the majority in the Donbass region that was attached to Ukraine in 1922. Russian Crimea was added in 1954. The Russians in these regions were not consulted since Ukraine was ruled by Moscow. Russians and Ukrainians coexisted peacefully until the American Empire began to promote Ukrainian nationalism. These coups involved Russians were financing from the U.S. government's National Endowment for Democracy, an agency created by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s to topple governments. Ukrainian Premier Viktor Yanukovych rejected the idea of joining NATO, so the American Empire dispatched its NGOs to instigate protests and random violence in February 2014, meeting with Ukrainian coup plotters in Germany. The Americans selected Ukrainian's next prime minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, pictured across from Kerry. Yats is our guy, Nuland declared in a phone call to U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt. When Pyatt warned that many European countries were uncomfortable with the Ukrainian coup, she shot back, quote, "Fuck the EU." Nuland's phone call was secretly recorded and released, causing great embarrassment to the Obama administration. Nuland and Ambassador Pyatt openly encouraged protests and passed out snacks to dupe protesters in the Ukrainian capital just before the coup. Millions of Ukrainians refused to accept the overthrow of their democratic government by the American Empire. Ethnic Russians protested and hundreds were beaten and some killed by Ukrainian nationalists. Russians in eastern Ukraine took up arms and blocked roads into their region. American Vice President Joe Biden arrived in Ukraine in April 2014 to encourage a so-called anti-terrorist operation against Russian rebels. Russia provided some military equipment to help these militias, but refused to intervene directly. The Ukrainian army was dispatched to crush these rebels, but retreated after some bloody clashes, resulting in a stalemate. Ukraine's trade with Russia was disrupted and caused more economic problems. Russia announced that it would no longer provide natural gas to Ukraine at a heavily discounted rate. Ukraine would have to pay the European rate, which it could not afford. The Ukrainian economy suffered as its citizens became aware of the American coup. Russia did not want to rule Ukraine, which is why it allowed independence. Nevertheless, the American Empire claimed that Russia had invaded Ukraine and caused the bloodshed. American corporate media lies when it states that Russia invaded Crimea. This region was part of Russia since 1783, until it was administratively attached to Ukraine in 1954 by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, a Ukrainian, to promote Soviet solidarity. Russians are the majority people in Crimea, and Russian is the common language. The 1997 Russian-Ukrainian partition agreement allowed Russia to keep 25,000 troops in Crimea for defensive purposes. In 2014, after years of Ukrainian political turmoil and an American coup, Russia accepted a request by the Republic of Crimea to rejoin Russia after 94% of its citizens voted in favor. Russian troops didn't invade Crimea, they were already there. Crimeans were puzzled by intense American opposition to this reannexation, and rightly concluded the Americans wanted NATO military bases in strategic Crimea. Adding Ukraine to NATO remains attractive to the American Empire, since it's the second largest nation in Europe by area, with 42 million people. The United States has provided Ukraine with $1.5 billion in military aid since 2014, to include $250 million in 2019. A search of the U.S. Army's website provides a list of 349 news articles, linked below, about U.S. Army operations in Ukraine in just the past 5 years. The 2014 American coup in Ukraine was an act of war against its people that toppled its democratically elected government. Permanent American military bases in Ukraine may eventually appear, but America's leading warmonger, Senator John McCain, was furious that Crimeans escaped. In 2014, he openly expressed disappointment at the lack of political support for NATO military action against Russia to conquer Crimea, even though it may have resulted in a world war.
So we have no military obligation here to defend Ukraine. And do you think there is a military option, even if we had an obligation?
I'd love to tell you that there is, Andrea, but frankly, I do not see it. I'm glad to see our U.S. military naval presence in the Black Sea. Again, I wish that there were.
Смотри, заехала техника между двух школ. Вот так они, блядь, защитники ебаные, блядь, текают нахуй.
The Donbass republics were officially recognized by Russia. We see here the signing ceremony with President Putin on February the 21st. After 8 years of war, or rather 8 years of the Donbass republics being under attack by Ukraine, both the republics swiftly appealed to President Putin for military assistance to end the conflict. President Putin announced Russia's military action with the following statement.
Народные республики Донбасса обратились к России с просьбой о помощи. В связи с этим, в соответствии со статьей 51 части 7 Устава ООН, санкции Совета Федерации России и во исполнение ратифицированных Федеральным собранием 22 февраля сего года договоров о дружбе и взаимопомощи с Донецкой Народной Республикой и Луганской Народной Республикой, мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима. И для этого мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины, а также преданию суду тех, кто совершил многочисленные кровавые преступления против мирных жителей, в том числе и граждан Российской Федерации. При этом в наши планы не входит оккупация украинских территорий. Мы никому и ничего не собираемся навязывать силой. Вместе с тем мы слышим, что в последнее время...
Не очень четко, но ладно. Хз, бля.
Где? Огонь! Слава Украине! Ярослава!
Сволочи вы, сволочи! Будьте вы прокляты! Свело ваше колено на 7-е, на 5-е, на 10-е, на 20-е! Будьте вы прокляты все! Сыночка моя! Сыночка! Господи! Господи! Как мне это все пережить? Как мне это все пережить? Кому? Здесь нет даже ополченцев! Какие ополченцы, твари! Суки продажные! Ой, боже мой! За что? За что убили моего ребенка?